Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. Just continuing on a bit from I'm a Celebrity, Nick Knowles from DIY SOS, talking about the moon landing, just a correction of the last thing. So I was Googling about the Van Allen bout, and it was what they said on I'm a Celeb was more accurate than my definition of it, because I was thinking it was like a, like the ozone layer type thing, where it was the barrier between the radiation and us, whereas more like a collection of radiation from solar winds, and it's got electrons and protons. It's got two different bands, as it were, and the explanation they gave for passing through it was the one Anne Haggerty gave, which was they were going there to have a certain trajectory and a certain speed, and then it only allowed a certain amount of rads of radiation to pass through. So they claimed that each astronaut claimed 0.30 or something like that, and apparently a human can take 300 rads, they said. That's all, of course, assuming that there is such thing as the Van Allen bout, because that's the thing I get when people talk about how do we have a non-contained system, i.e. the Earth, because some people believe that the Earth is non-contained, and then you've got a vacuumous system out there. How do the two of them coexist? Because you have to have a container. You couldn't have them, because otherwise the vacuum would seep out. But then, of course, that's you're trusting that the information that you have is correct in the first place. And if anything we've learnt from flat Earth and from living on this planet, the amount of lies that we get told every day, how do we know that what even that they claim to be true is true? If you believe that we didn't go to the moon, then wait a minute, how do you know that there is a Van Allen bout, or what Van Allen described as about is actually correct? He's never been up there. He never sort of, and also, how do we know that the space is vacuumous? How do we know space even exists? You're basing your knowledge upon other people's claims. And if you know that other people's claims have been false before, then you have to evaluate everything, isn't it? That's true discernment, I guess. That's why a lot of people are led with the answer of I don't know after a while, because you have to suspend your belief in a way, in the sense that if I say, oh yeah, there is space, there is vacuumous, and the Earth is contained, well, wait a minute, how do I know all these things? Because I'm basing that on the science that I've been told. But the same science told me that the Earth was round. The same science told me that we went on the moon. The same science tells me they can fly, the Hubble, and take pictures of planets. It was really interesting. I can't remember which one I was watching now. It might be in the Companion, The Pursuit of Truth on YouTube, where they were talking about, it might have been Patrick Jane's YouTube channel, about how they go about creating, no, I think it was Robert Matthews, how they create images. Yeah, it was Robert Matthews. It was really interesting how they go about, and because these telescopes are not like cameras, because that's often what we think about. They're actually picking up data, and that data is then translated and made into a picture. And they were showing how they change pictures of different, the same planet. 1 minute it's watery, then it's rocky, where they analyse the different data, and they're basically admitting that a lot of the things that you see, and this is what I always thought when I used to watch Sky at night, I would, they would never tell you that, oh, a minute, this is a visual representation. This isn't actually someone with a camera taking a picture of the universe or this planet. It's a visual representation. They don't put that up. Well, they used to, but nowadays, if you watch, you won't find them saying, artist's impression. And then, wait a minute, so why are we relying upon artist's impressions? How do we you know, I mean, is it even, how accurate is his impression? And like it was saying on this Robert Matthews one, is they were saying that that's not important. The important thing is the communication. You'd think that the most important thing would be to get it as accurate as possible, not, you know, start making things up just because we don't have the ability to send a camera. And it's like, and I was listening to the end of Darren Nesbitt's UFO presentation on, and he was saying, like, you know, you think that everyone has a bloody smartphone these days, and why is no one, like, you know, taking it up into space? I assume they work. I mean, they must be able to send Wi-Fi live stream. I mean, they should be able to live stream YouTube from there, because in the 60s they were able to make a phone call to President Nixon in 1960s. The 1960s or early 1970s, they were able to make a phone call from the moon to the Earth. They were also able to remote control from the Earth that shot of when the shuttle goes back to their capsule up above the moon's orbit, when it pans up. That was apparently done live. I don't know how much delay there was between the signal. That, I mean, I'd like to meet that editor or that camera operator, because to imagine, like, I don't know, there must have been a gap between the visual and the signal getting back to the Earth, but they managed to track up and track down. And that was interesting. The bit I saw, I can't remember whether it was Darren Nesbitt's one, it showed it tracked up and it came back down, and then the camera carried on. So wait a minute, is that still a live feed coming from the moon there? Or they switched it off? Battery ran out probably. But yeah, it's very interesting. But the other thing is that I was thinking about, to do with the celebrity clip, is just because someone has an answer for something doesn't mean that that's right. You know, the saying, you have an answer for everything. You know, so, but it's interesting how people will fall for that. You know, they'll be looking at Anne Haggerty because she's a quiz master on The Chase, you know, so she's considered knowledgeable. That's why I considered her like the authority figure. That because she has an answer for every question, that means that, you know, that she's given the right answer. And it's a bit like how NASA will come up, you know, when someone will question. I mean, I suspect when the original telescreen pictures of the moon landing were broadcast, no one questioned the more than one shadow direction. Whereas now, years later, people are questioning that, or at least, I don't know, from when onwards. I know it's been going a long time, that people questioning those photographs. And now I've seen conflicting answers when I've tried to find out myself what the official answer is, and, you know, some will say it's to do with the landscape perspective, that you know, if it's not level, then the light bend, you know, happen that way. But I don't know if that's a true thing, because obviously you should be able to test that here on Earth, isn't it? If you've got a mountain and you've got a light source, and how the shadows, if the shadows do change direction because of the way they're falling on the land. Now, the one Anne mentioned was about that the light, I assume from the sun, bouncing off the Earth and being reflected onto the moon, creating a second light source. I've never heard that one before. I don't know if that's possible or not. I guess then you'd have to, as the moon reflects, I mean, is it more, I assume is more reflective, though it's smaller. Does that ever create a second light source on the Earth? I'm assuming the problem is you'd only get that at night time, wouldn't you? Or maybe, because the moon doesn't. So I don't know whether you could validate that or not. I mean, it's an interesting argument whether it's factually accurate or not, I don't know. The fact that there's two different, I mean, this is the problem, you know, is someone can come up with an answer for something, and then you have then to decide, well, does it sound right? But that's probably not the best way of discernment, because you're then just judging, isn't it? You're not really actually putting it to the test, which is the only real way you can know whether someone's telling the truth or misrepresenting the idea. Like, I can give you an idea of, like, oh, the moon, you know, there's two light sources, i.e. the sun, and they brought their own light source, and it was in a sound studio. Sound set, I don't know why they call it a sound set, I assume that's an old-fashioned term. So which one's right? You've got three different answers there to the scenario. How do you know which is right? Now, just because it's written in a book, just because NASA says it, well, so you're just going to believe it like that? Just because an authority figure says something, you believe it? I mean, that is a little bit worrying, because then you're just giving over your brain, as it were, to someone else. The whole point we all have a brain is so that we use it ourselves. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. It was interesting that it got aired. Oh, apparently there was another conversation that didn't get aired, that Malik reported to the newspapers after he left the camp, was that Noel Edmonds of Noel's House Party and No Deal had a discussion with Nick Knowles of DIY SOS about human evolution. Apparently, Noel Edmonds believed that we weren't descended from monkeys, apes, and Nick Knowles believed that we were. Now, whether any of that's true, who knows? But it's interesting that they didn't air that one, which you would have thought was actually less controversial. Or maybe they both gave good enough arguments that they were worried that people might actually question Darwin's unproven theory of evolution. But what's good is these things are now seeping out through the mainstream. Now, whether they're gatekept, well, they are definitely gatekept. You saw the example how it was gatekept. But just for them getting out there, it gives people confidence to actually be able to raise these things without fearing retribution, which is a real thing, because I was listening on YouTube. There was, I think I put it on the companion as well. It was, I think, what was his name? Professor, is it John Tracy or something like that, to do with Sandy Hook. He was a tenured professor, and he lost his job for questioning whether Sandy Hook was a real event or not, or staged. Although they made out that it wasn't due to free speech, it was due to some other technicality that they sacked him. You know, if he'd said the right things, the things that they want to say, then I'm sure then he would have still been in his job. Yeah, it's suspicious, obviously, but yeah, it seems like certain subjects, you know, you can't. You know, they like to talk about freedom of speech. And yeah, I know some of them can, you know, people can be very distasteful when they talk about things, but if they're talking about things in a calm way, and, you know, trying to rationally talk about a subject, you know, that they're, you know, concerned with because things don't make sense, or they're quite trying to question it. I mean, to shut that down, to demonise people and attack people, which they did in this case in the media for him, I mean, it just, you know, so what, you just want people to be sheep. You want people to just, you know, repeat after me. I mean, have we not learned anything from that kind of... And then you want to tell everyone that there is such a thing as freedom of speech, and everyone's free to, you know, to say what they like within reason. I mean, if you're doing it in a tactful, polite way, and, you know, you're making out that it's your view, and you're just trying to, you know, things don't make sense to you, and you want the answers to things. I mean, I don't see a problem with that, no matter what the subject is. But I think it's all to do with this idea that people believe that other people, we have different power than each other. I'm going to talk about that in another podcast later. But anyway, take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.